I was scrolling through a technical briefing from Japan's Acquisition, Technology and Logistics Agency, essentially their version of DARPA, when a specific clip stopped me cold. It wasn't a massive explosion or a high-speed chase, it was a missile doing a barrel roll. Imagine a sleek, matte black projectile, its body a collection of sharp polyhedral angles and hidden S-shaped intakes, gliding silently toward a warship. Just as it enters the red zone, the frantic seconds where defensive cannons usually shred anything in the air, the missile begins a graceful, controlled corkscrew. To a casual observer, it looks like an air show stunt. To a fire control computer, it's a mathematical nightmare. The colleague who showed me the footage was practically beaming. He pointed at the screen, tapping the glass. "See that?" he said. "That's 1,000 kilometers of keep away." He was convinced this wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. He spoke about the modular warheads and the way it could be launched from a truck in the mountains or a destroyer at sea, calling it the ultimate insurance policy for the Pacific. To him, the island defense missile was the ironclad proof that Japan had finally traded its shield for a very long, very sharp sword. But then the atmosphere in the room shifted. A retired naval analyst sitting nearby didn't share the excitement. He didn't even look up from his coffee. "Nice CGI," he muttered. He pointed out that the target in the simulation looked suspiciously like a Chinese Type 730 CIWS, a specific high-stakes choice for a demo video. "Doing a spiral in a simulation is one thing," he added, "but outrunning a wall of lead in the real world is another. Is this a revolutionary breakthrough, or just Tokyo's most expensive piece of psychological theater?" That sharp divide between the giddy technical hype and the cold skepticism of the old guard is where things get interesting. Japan is moving at breakneck speed to rewrite its military DNA. But as these high-tech promos flood the scene, we have to ask, is this the dawn of a new era of naval dominance? Or is the actual effectiveness of these weapons still just a digital illusion?
That is the trillion-yen question, isn't it? And I'm really glad we're starting with that divide, the hype versus, the nice CGI comment.
Right.
Because that one clip, that barrel roll, it really does encapsulate this entire moment we're in. It's so seductive, the idea that one clever piece of geometry can solve a massive geopolitical crisis.
It is. It's incredibly seductive. I mean, the clip went viral for a reason. It looks like it's straight out of a science fiction movie. But, as we always talk about, you have to look past the cool CGI.
Mm-hmm.
We know that while that barrel roll is the hook, the real story is what's happening underneath all that matte black paint.
Yeah.
We're talking about Japan, a country that has for 80 years defined itself by pacifism. And now they're suddenly engineering their way out of that box.
Exactly. And that's why this isn't just a deep dive into a missile. We're really dissecting a system of systems. If you really want to get what this island defense missile, or the new SSM as the bureaucrats call it, what it really represents, you have to look at a triad of huge shifts. So first, you've got the technological shift. And to put it simply, it's how do you trick a robot gun that shoots 10,000 rounds a minute? That's a pure physics problem.
A completely terrifying physics problem.
It is. And then second, you have the political shift. How do you build an offensive weapon, one that's capable of striking foreign soil, when your constitution technically forbids the possession of war potential? I mean, that's a legal and philosophical tightrope walk.
A tightrope that's been in place for generations.
Right. And then third, the strategic shift.
Yeah.
How does a modular industrial strategy, this idea of making missiles like they're Lego sets, how does that change the actual balance of power in the Pacific?
Okay, let's unpack all of this, because that triad it's heavy. It's not just about a new weapon. We're talking about a fundamental rewiring of East Asian security. So let's set the stage. We are doing a deep dive into the island defense missile, the ghost in the machine that has everyone from Washington to Beijing taking very, very careful notes.
And our mission here really is to figure out if this is a real capability, or if it is, like that analyst in your intro said, just very expensive psychological theater.
To get into that, we have to start with the hardware, the metal and the math, the dual, kinematics versus algorithms. And to frame this, I want to share a perspective I came across that really, I think, sets the mood. I was spending a lot of time lately looking into the shifting tides of the Indo-Pacific, particularly as Japan moves away from its traditional shield role towards something much more potent. I heard a story recently about an engineer at a defense contractor in Nagoya, a man who spent 30 years perfecting the quiet hum of turbofan engines. He grew up in the shadow of the peace constitution, where defense was a literal static word. But as he watched the digital renders of the island defense missile perform its final violent barrel roll, a spiral designed to confuse the rapid-fire CIWS of a modern destroyer, he felt a strange, chilling pride. Try to imagine the tension in that lab. It's not just a physics problem of kinematics versus tracking speed. For him, every degree of that roll represents a desperate hope that the missile is fast enough to never actually be used. It's the technical manifestation of a paradox, building a weapon so complex that its only success is staying on the shelf, even as he knows the systems it's meant to bypass are getting smarter every day. Looking at this, I can't help but feel the weight of that engineering pressure. It's a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, where the cat is an automated Gatling gun, and the mouse is a billion-yen piece of stealth geometry.
That is a very powerful image, the engineer in Nagoya. It really grounds this whole high-tech discussion in the human reality of the people building it. And he's absolutely right to be anxious. The engineering challenge here is, well, it's immense.
So let's look at what they've actually built. We have the footage from ATLA, Japan's Acquisition Technology and Logistics Agency. And this thing, it does not look like your grandfather's missile. It's not a simple tube with fins on the back.
No, absolutely not. Based on that ATLA footage and some of the analysis coming out of Kawasaki Heavy Industries, this is a purpose-built stealth body. From the ground up, it's designed to be invisible, or at least very, very hard to see on radar.
So walk us through it. Describe it for us. What are we actually looking at?
Visually, you should be thinking of something like a miniature F-117 Nighthawk. Or maybe the Chinese J-20 fighter jet. It uses all these sharp polyhedral angles.
Oh, no curves?
Very few. In the world of radar, flat surfaces and 90-degree angles are your worst enemy. They're like mirrors. They reflect radar waves right to the sender, shouting, "Here I am." So this missile uses all these faceted angled surfaces to deflect those waves away in any direction but back to the source. It's also matte black, which heavily suggests it's coated in radar-absorbent materials.
I noticed the air intakes, specifically, they weren't just simple holes in the side of the missile. They looked almost organic, sort of blended into the fuselage.
Right, and that's a critical detail. Those are flush, S-shaped intakes, or S-ducts. And this is one of the hardest things to engineer properly on a small airframe.
Why is that so important?
Because in any jet engine, the spinning turbine blades at the front are a massive reflector for radar. They light up like a Christmas tree because you're essentially looking at a rapidly spinning metal disc.
So it's a huge radar signature.
It's the biggest one on a stealth aircraft, usually. An S-duct intake curves the airflow so that if you're a radar looking into the intake from the front, you can't get a line of sight to the engine blades. You just see a curved tunnel.
So the radar waves go in, they bounce around the inside of that curve, get absorbed by the material, rather than bouncing straight back out to the enemy ship.
Exactly. It hides the fan face. It's a fundamental principle of stealth design.
And in the video, we see these pop-out wings.
Yeah, 3-section pop-out wings and twin vertical stabilizers. It clearly launches in a very compact state, probably from a canister on a truck or a ship, and then it unfolds itself into this glider-like shape once it's in the air.
Which brings us to the engine itself.
Yeah.
It's powered by the XKJ301 turbofan.
It is.
That sounds very technical. Why does that specific engine matter so much?
Because it tells us everything about what this missile isn't. It is not a hypersonic speed demon, it's a subsonic cruiser. The XKJ3011 is derived from Kawasaki's KJ300 family of engines. It's what's called a high bypass turbofan.
Okay, break that down for me. High bypass turbofan.
In plain English, it's designed for fuel efficiency, not for raw brute force speed. A lot of the air it sucks in goes around the engine core, not through it. It's quieter and much, much more fuel efficient than a pure jet engine.
Okay, hold on. You say efficiency, but we're talking about a war zone. Efficiency sounds a lot like sitting duck. If I'm a naval commander, and I know everyone else, China, Russia, the US is in this frantic race toward hypersonic missiles that fly at Mach 5 or Mach 8. Why on earth is Japan building a subsonic cruiser? It feels like bringing a knife to a gunfight.
It does feel completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? But you have to look at the math and the physics of hypersonics. They are incredibly fast, yes, but that speed comes at a cost. They are hot, they are loud, and they are astronomically expensive.
What do you mean by hot?
I mean, literally hot. The friction of the air at Mach 5 turns the missile's skin into something that glows red hot. It becomes a glowing meteor on any thermal or infrared sensor. You launch one, and every infrared satellite in that hemisphere lights up.
So you're fast, but everyone can see you coming from 1,000 miles away.
Precisely. The slow speed of this Japanese missile is actually a camouflage tactic. It's about managing its thermal signature. A high bypass turbofan like this one runs relatively cool. It mixes a lot of cold bypass air with the hot exhaust. The goal is to blend into the background thermal noise of the ocean's surface. Japan is betting that being invisible is better than being fast.
But still, if a radar does manage to pick it up, it can't outrun anything. It's cruising at what, 600 miles per hour maybe? A modern fighter jet can catch that. A ship's defensive missiles can definitely catch that.
And that is the absolute trade-off. They've made a choice. But there's another factor here, which is quantity. How much does a single hypersonic missile cost? $10 million, $20 million. They are incredibly complex and difficult to build.
I have to assume this Japanese missile is cheaper.
It has to be, significantly. If you can build, say, 10 of these subsonic stealth missiles for the price of one hypersonic weapon, you suddenly have a different kind of advantage. You have mass, you can overwhelm defenses, you can flood the zone with multiple threats from multiple directions.
And that efficiency gives it range.
That's the other key. Because it sips fuel, it can glide for well over 1,000 kilometers. A solid rocket motor on a traditional missile burns out in seconds, maybe a minute. This thing can fly for an hour or even more. It can take a circuitous route. It can pop up where you least expect it.
So it's a marathon runner, not a sprinter. But let's talk about the sprint at the very end, because no matter how stealthy you are, eventually you have to get close to the ship. You have to enter what they call the red zone.
Correct. The terminal phase. We're talking about the final few kilometers, the last 30 seconds of flight.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The maneuver. In that ATLA video, we see it approach the target ship, and then it starts this crazy corkscrew spiral. It's not just weaving left and right, it's spinning around its central axis while still moving forward.
The barrel roll.
And waiting for it in that red zone is the adversary. The engineer in Nagoya called it the cat. We're talking about CIWS close-in weapon systems.
Specifically, systems like the Chinese Type 730, or even more frighteningly, the Type 1130. These are automated Gatling guns. The Type 1130 has 11 barrels and fires something like 10,000 rounds per minute. It puts up a literal wall of tungsten and depleted uranium.
10,000 rounds a minute. I can't even visualize that. It's not a stream of bullets, it's a solid beam of metal.
It is. And to hit a missile moving at, say, 600 miles an hour, the gun can't aim at the missile. It's a classic physics problem. It has to aim where the missile will be in 2 seconds. It's like a quarterback throwing a pass to a running receiver. You don't throw to where he is, you throw to where he's going to be.
So the gun is predicting the future.
Precisely. And to understand why that barrel roll is so clever, you have to understand the mind, or rather, the math of the gun. These systems use a prediction algorithm, most commonly something called a Kalman filter.
A Kalman filter. What is that exactly? Is that a form of AI?
Not AI in the way we think of it today, like a learning neural network. Think of it more like a hyper-aggressive pattern recognition system. Imagine you're playing catch with a friend. If they throw the ball in a smooth, predictable arc, your brain instinctively calculates where your hand needs to be to catch it. You don't look at the ball's current position, you look at its trajectory and predict its future position.
Right, I'm leading the target based on the arc I see.
Exactly. Your brain is a natural Kalman filter. Now imagine your friend throws the ball, but halfway through the air, the ball suddenly takes a sharp 90-degree turn to the left, then loops straight up, then starts spinning.
I'm gonna miss. I'm gonna catch nothing but air.
You're going to miss because your brain, your internal filter, relies on the assumption that physics is predictable, that momentum carries things in a straight line, or at least a predictable curve. The CIWS gun assumes the exact same thing. It tracks the missile for a split second, it establishes a vector, it draws a line into the future, and it fires a massive stream of tungsten bullets into that future spot in space.
The barrel roll breaks the line.
It doesn't just break the line, it completely shreds the prediction. By spiraling, the missile is constantly and continuously changing its aspect angle and its line of sight rates relative to the gun's radar. To the computer, the target is moving up, down, left, right, and forward all at the same time in a continuous, nonlinear curve.
It introduces chaos into the equation.
It explodes the error bars in the gun's math. The computer is basically shouting, "It should be here. No, wait, now it should be here. No, over here." And by the time the bullets arrive at any of those predicted spots, the missile is long gone.
That is fascinating. It is literally weaponized chaos. I know the Norwegian naval strike missile, the NSM, which is highly respected. It does a weave, right? It kind of U-shaped maneuver.
It does. The NSM is an excellent missile. It does a high G S-shaped weave. But a weave is still, in a sense, two-dimensional. It's left and right, or up and down. This Japanese IDM spiral is three-dimensional and far more aggressive. It's designed to maximize the miss distance of every single one of those 10,000 bullets.
However, and there is always a however, we have to bring in the skepticism. That analyst in your intro called it a digital illusion. And frankly, there are sources, including some pretty critical analyses from neighboring countries, that say, look, this thing is subsonic. It's slow.
And it's a perfectly valid critique. We have to be objective here. There is a very strong school of thought that says, in the end, physics always wins. If a Type 1130 CIWS puts enough metal into a cone of air, just a sheer volume of fire, it doesn't matter how cleverly you're spiraling, you might just fly into a bullet by pure chance.
Right, it's the shotgun approach. If I fire a shotgun at a fly, I don't need to aim perfectly at the fly. I just need to fill the air around the fly with pellets. It's the wall of lead theory.
Exactly. And there is another massive, massive issue here. Guidance. The missile has sensors in its nose, probably a dual-mode seeker with imaging infrared and radio frequency capabilities. It needs to be able to see the ship to hit it.
But the missile is spinning upside down and sideways.
That's the billion-yen problem. Imagine trying to take a clear photo of a specific car's license plate while you're strapped into a roller coaster that's doing a loop-the-loop. Keeping that seeker locked onto the target ship while the entire airframe is doing a violent barrel roll is a massive software and hardware challenge.
If the sensor loses lock, even for a split second,
the missile misses. It goes dumb. So Japan is making a huge bet. They are betting that their software engineers are better than the enemy's bullets.
So they're betting on confusion and stealth over raw speed.
That's the philosophy. They are betting that the stealth body gets the missile close enough that the enemy gun only has a precious few seconds to react, and then the spiral maneuver makes those few seconds an absolute computational nightmare. It's a gamble. But it's a gamble born out of a specific strategic necessity.
You know, when you describe it like that, it strikes me that the barrel roll itself is a perfect metaphor for Japan's entire strategic position right now.
How do you mean?
Well, physically, the missile is twisting and turning in this complex, unpredictable way to avoid being destroyed. Politically, the country of Japan is doing the exact same thing. They're trying to twist their way around 80 years of pacifist tradition and constitutional law to survive in an increasingly hostile neighborhood.
That is a very, very apt way to put it. The barrel roll isn't just aerodynamic, it's constitutional.
And that brings us right to the second story I wanted to share. Because if that engineer in Nagoya represents the metal, this next story represents the paper and the immense weight that that paper holds. I saw a discussion online a few days ago that really stuck with me, and it was centered around a young legislative aide in Tokyo working late nights in the Diet building. Her task was to draft the memos on how a 1,000-kilometer range missile fits into the exclusive defense framework of Article 9. There's a profound human exhaustion in that kind of work, trying to find the linguistic bridge between a pacifist national identity and the hard reality of regional deterrence. I heard that during one of these debates, she was staring at a map of the Miyako Strait, and she realized that the island defense missile isn't just a name, it's a psychological boundary. For her generation, this missile represents the moment the peace constitution stopped being a comfortable blanket and became a restrictive suit of armor that Japan is now desperately trying to outgrow. It's a heavy realization. While some see this as a necessary evolution for survival, others see it as a betrayal of a century of hard-won lessons. My take. It's deeply uncomfortable to watch a nation rewrite its own soul in real time, even if you understand the cold, strategic logic behind the necessity of counterstrike. It's the story of a country trying to protect its future, while also mourning the simplicity of its past.
Mourning the simplicity of the past. That is a very powerful way to put it, because for decades, Japan's defense policy was beautifully simple, Senshu Boe.
Which means exclusively defensive defense.
Exactly. The simplest way to think about it is that Japan is the shield and the United States is the sword. If someone punches Japan, Japan is allowed to block the punch and then call the Americans to come and punch back.
But Japan was not allowed to punch back itself.
Not at the source. Japan was not allowed to possess weapons that were considered capable of striking an enemy's territory. No long-range bombers, no aircraft carriers in the traditional sense, and certainly no long-range ballistic or cruise missiles.
But this island defense missile has a range of over 1,000 kilometers. That can easily reach foreign soil. That can reach the coast of China. It can reach deep into North Korea. That is a sword.
It is undeniably a sword. They've changed the terminology now. The official term is counterstrike capability, but a sword by any other name is still a sword.
So what changed? Why drop the shield now after 80 years?
The technology and the posture of their neighbors changed dramatically. Look at North Korea. They aren't just testing old scuds anymore. They have solid fuel missiles that can be hidden in caves and launched in minutes. They're testing missiles with irregular maneuvering trajectories that are very hard to intercept. And then you look at the hypersonic weapons being developed in the region.
They're just too fast to catch.
They're too fast and too unpredictable for the current generation of missile defense systems, like Patriot batteries, to reliably intercept. So the logic in Tokyo shifted. They had this realization, if we can't be sure we can catch the arrow, we have to be able to break the bow.
Meaning you have to be able to hit the launcher before it fires.
Or at least have the credible threat to hit the launcher to prevent the attack from happening in the first place. That is the definition of deterrence.
That makes cold, hard, logical sense, but it opens a huge political can of worms.
Oh.
I keep reading about this concept of entrapment anxiety within Japan.
Yes, and this is where the domestic political debate gets incredibly heated. If Japan has 1,000-kilometer missiles, they are no longer just a passive host for American forces. They become an active part of the offensive kill chain.
Right. So if a conflict were to break out over Taiwan, and there are U.S. Marines and Japanese missile launchers on islands like Yonaguni, which is only, about 70 miles from Taiwan?
It's right there.
Does that make those islands an instant legitimate target for a first strike?
That is the absolute fear. Islands like Yonaguni, Okinawa, if they house these offensive weapons, they are no longer just bystanders hosting U.S. bases. They become active combatants from minute one of a conflict. The Japanese Communist Party and other opposition groups argue that this guts the spirit of Article 9 and invites destruction upon Japanese soil rather than preventing it.
But the politicians, the ruling party, they must know this. Why are they pushing forward so aggressively despite that incredible risk?
Because public opinion has shifted. The Ukraine effect cannot be overstated here. Before 2022, support for possessing these kinds of strike capabilities was always a minority position. A Yomiuri newspaper poll back in 2006 had it at just 39% support.
But Ukraine changed that.
It changed everything. After seeing a large, powerful neighbor invade a smaller neighbor, the numbers completely flipped. Recent polls show over 60%, sometimes close to 70%, support for acquiring these capabilities.
The public realized that being a shield doesn't help you if the other guy just decides to keep swinging a sledgehammer.
Precisely. The abstract concept of international norms and peaceful diplomacy suddenly felt very fragile. The public decided they wanted hardware.
And of course, they aren't doing this alone. We have to talk about the U.S. connection. This isn't just Japan going rogue. This is happening in concert with Washington.
No, this is a core part of the American strategy for the region. The buzzword is integrated deterrence. The U.S. is actively encouraging this. In fact, as a stopgap measure, Japan is buying 400 U.S.-made Tomahawk cruise missiles.
A stopgap? What for?
Because the island defense missile, the advanced stealthy one doing the barrel roll, is a domestic Japanese program. And it won't be ready in large numbers until maybe 2026 or 2027 at the earliest. The Tomahawks are the bridge to get them from here to there.
But think about what that means. Japan is buying American offensive missiles to plug directly into an American strategic framework.
Yeah.
It fully integrates Japan into offensive planning, not just defensive waiting. It's a massive shift.
A historic shift.
But, there's another layer to this. We've talked about the tech, the physics, we've talked about the politics and the law, but somebody has to actually make these things.
Right.
And the way Japan is planning to make them is, it's an industrial revolution of its own.
The economics, the strategy of industry, this is where the long-term structural impact of this decision really lies.
And that brings me to the final piece of the puzzle I want to introduce.
Yeah.
The craftsman. There's a fascinating perspective I encountered regarding the modular nature of this new tech. The idea that the same missile brain can live on a ship, a truck, or a plane. I think about a small business owner in Oda City, a craftsman whose workshop produces high-precision components for these modular systems. For him, this isn't just about strategic implications. It's about the survival of Japan's industrial base. He remembers the years when defense work was a dead end because you couldn't export a single bolt. Now, with all the talk of procurement efficiency and liberalization of exports, he sees a path where his craft might actually reach a global market. It's a shift from a closed-loop Galapagos industry to something that looks like a global competitor. However, when I read about these economic efficiencies, I have to pause. There's something inherently jarring about treating the tools of war as a growth industry or a modular product line, like their smartphones. It makes sense on paper for the taxpayers and the military planners, but from a human standpoint, it's a sobering reminder that peace is increasingly being underwritten by the efficiency of the assembly line. It's a cold, hard look at how survival and commerce are becoming inextricably linked in East Asia.
Galapagos industry. That is the absolute key phrase there. For years, Japanese military technology was exactly like the animals on the Galapagos Islands. It evolved in complete isolation, becoming unique and often brilliant, but totally unable to survive anywhere else in the world.
Because their constitution prevented them from exporting weapons.
Yeah.
Right? So they had to make these small batches of very expensive, very specific gear just for their own self-defense forces.
Exactly. You look at things like the Type 90 main battle tank or the F-2 fighter jet. They were excellent machines, but they were astronomically expensive because they only built a few hundred of them. There was no economy of scale. This new missile, the IDM, is designed from the ground up to break that mold. It's built on a modular philosophy.
Explain that. The host in me hears modular and immediately thinks of Lego.
And that's essentially what it is. It's Lego for warfare. The IDM isn't just one missile, it's a core airframe. The engine, the wings, the fuel tank, the stealth body, but the nose cone, the payload, that's completely interchangeable.
You can just snap out the front end and snap in a different one.
That's the idea. And Lego for warfare sounds fun, but let's dig into the supply chain implications of that. This is where the deep dive gets really interesting for anyone who follows the defense industry.
Because usually, defense contracts are famously, notoriously inefficient.
Horribly so. In the old Galapagos model, a company like Mitsubishi or Kawasaki would get a contract to build a specific missile for a specific truck launcher. If the Navy then decided they wanted a ship-launched version, they'd have to go back to the drawing board and practically design a whole new missile. Different parts, different supply chains, different tooling for the factories.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare for trying to build up an arsenal in a hurry.
It's a recipe for running out of ammunition in the first 3 days of a conflict. But this new modular approach completely changes the industrial floor. You can have one main assembly line pumping out the universal core, the engine, the wings, the fuel. That can run 247.
Like a car company making a common chassis for multiple different models.
It's the exact same principle. And then the various noses, the different seekers and warheads, are built separately, perhaps by different specialized companies. This also solves a massive problem in modern warfare: obsolescence. In the past, if radar technology improved and you needed a new seeker, you had to design and build a whole new missile. Now, you just snap on a newer, better nose.
It effectively future-proofs the entire inventory.
And it creates economies of scale. That craftsman in Oda City isn't making 50 custom machine brackets a year anymore. He's making 5,000 standardized brackets that can be used on any version of the missile. That massive volume drives down the unit cost, which in turn allows the Japanese government to buy more missiles for the same budget, which increases the overall deterrence factor. It's a virtuous cycle if they can actually pull it off.
So what are the actual options? What kind of Lego bricks, what kind of noses are we talking about here?
Well, you have the standard kinetic options, the ones that go boom. You'd have a high explosive warhead, a fragmentation type for sinking ships. Or you could have a hardened penetrator warhead for busting concrete bunkers or command centers. But here is where it gets really sci-fi. You can install non-kinetic noses.
Non-kinetic, as in it doesn't explode.
Right. An electronic warfare nose. You could launch this missile, have it fly out 1,000 kilometers, and then just have it loiter over an enemy fleet, jamming their radar and communications. Or a reconnaissance nose, a flying camera that streams high-definition video and data back to your fleet before a strike.
So it completely blurs the line between a cruise missile and a high-end surveillance drone.
It obliterates the line. It becomes a loitering munition or a suicide drone, depending on how you want to use it. It can fly out, watch, wait for the perfect moment when the enemy's admiral steps onto the bridge and then strike. Or it can just watch and then fly into the sea when it runs out of fuel. This flexibility is what makes it so powerful and so economically viable.
And all of this enables the grand strategy, the island defense strategy, using Japan's geography as a weapon.
Yes, Japan is an archipelago. And the Nansei Island chain, the Ryukyus, stretches like a string of pearls from the Japanese mainland almost all the way to Taiwan, blocking China's direct access to the Pacific Ocean.
So the plan is to deploy these missiles on trucks across all those tiny islands.
That is the plan. It's a strategy called sea denial. The goal isn't to control the sea, but to deny it to your adversary. If you put launchers for these missiles on trucks and hide them in the mountains on every one of those islands, From Kyushu down to Yonaguni, you create a lethal keep-out zone.
A gauntlet.
A 1,000-kilometer-deep gauntlet. A Chinese fleet trying to exit the first island chain to get to the Pacific has to pass through it. They have to run a blockade of stealthy, barrel-rolling missiles being launched from mountainside caves that they can't possibly see or target in advance.
It turns the geography of Japan from a vulnerability into a massive fortress.
And industrially, if this works. If Japan proves to the world that it can mass-produce a modular, stealthy, highly effective, and relatively affordable missile, other nations will want it.
Export potential.
Huge potential. Countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, maybe even Australia or European nations. Japan could transform itself from a niche, high-cost buyer of arms to a major global seller. That changes the entire economic structure of the region, and it normalizes Japan as a military power on the world stage.
So let's bring this all together. We've looked at the tech, the politics, and the industry. Let's try to recap.
I mean, you have a missile that dances, that literally does a pirouette to fool the most advanced robot guns on the planet. You have a pacifist constitution being reinterpreted in real time, driven by the raw fear of being left defenseless in a very rough neighborhood. And you have a dormant manufacturing base waking up from a long slumber, getting ready to churn out weapons with the same efficiency that they churn out Toyotas.
It's a lot. It really feels like we're watching a tipping point in history.
It is. But I think the ultimate paradox here, the thing that sits at the very heart of this whole story, is the intention. Japan is building these aggressive, long-range, frankly nightmare-inducing weapons for one very specific reason, so that they never, ever have to fight.
It's pure deterrence.
It's the ultimate insurance policy. The hope of that engineer in Nagoya and of that legislative aid in Tokyo is that this missile is so scary and the strategy behind it so robust that no one would ever dare to cross the line. They are arming themselves to the teeth in a desperate bid to keep the peace.
It's the classic peace through strength argument, which has a very long and complicated history. And strength can often be misinterpreted as aggression.
Which brings us to the final provocative thought here.
Go on.
We spent this whole deep dive talking about a missile doing a barrel roll to avoid a gun. It's a cool visual. It's a fascinating technical problem. But the real maneuver here is Japan itself. The entire nation is spiraling out of its post-war pacifist shell. The missile technology is meant to work because it's unpredictable. The gun doesn't know where it's going next. And as Japan becomes a military heavyweight again, that's the real issue. The hope is that this move stabilizes the Pacific by balancing the scales. But the risk, the thing that keeps strategists in every capital up at night, is that it just adds one more powerful, unpredictable variable to an already volatile equation. When everyone in the room is armed with a very sharp sword, the room doesn't always become safer. Sometimes it just becomes bloodier.